Welcome to the Marriage Boss Podcast, and I'm totally pumped today because I've got a good friend, and this young lady is doing some amazing things in the world. I'm going to read you a quote from Vinay Rai, who is an author, philanthropist, billionaire, and the founder of Rai University in India. Dr. Neeta Bhushan is transforming the next frontier of leadership. She's a multidimensional young lady using connection and abounding promise to shift the dialogue of human potential, inspiring millions to understand their emotions during an ever-changing and increasingly chaotic world. That's what I saw when I first saw her bio. Neeta is an emotional intelligence advocate, international speaker, host of the Revolutionary Leadership Podcast, and is founder of the Global Grit Institute. Neeta's personal journey through navigating death, cancer, domestic violence, and divorce, and how she overcomes extraordinary adversity, began her quest to embark on her own self-discovery. Leaving her traditional career as a cosmetic dentist to embark on global advocacy championing emotional awareness and new thought leadership. After spreading transformational wisdom and inspiration to top-level CEOs, business executives around the world, notable changemakers from various sectors, and truly understanding human dynamics in traveling to over 45 countries, Neeta's greater mission is to create a more heart-centered, humanistic society, realizing the capacity for change lies within the mastery of our own emotional grit, using empathy-based solutions to push forth global impact in our communities and thereby shifting economies as a result. Neeta, welcome to the Marriage Boss Podcast.
Wow, Rick, that was such an amazing introduction and no tongue ties there, so thank you.
I did my best on that one. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. I've been following your work for quite some time now, and it's amazing that now we have this grounding of emotional grit to talk about.
It is, and I have been following you also, and we have some amazing common friends and people who are really doing some great things in the world. And so, being that I was following the Emotional Grit Tour and this whole thing from like the inception all the way to the creation now and soon to be release, I got my email last week, and I've been following all your emails, and so great job with all that. And then all of a sudden, I get this one. Here's the intro, the first chapter or intro, and I'm downloaded it, and I was expecting a PDF, and I get an audio file with you speaking the intro, and not to mention that I love audios, but to hear your voice deliver it, and I listened to it 3 times right away, and I was so inspired, not only to support it and jump on the Ambassador Club, but also just to reach out to you to have you on the show because I wanted you to tell everyone in person what this was about, what this journey's about, and share you with my audience.
Oh my gosh, it has been such an amazing roller coaster and ride, as you have been seeing, and I'm super excited to be here. And obviously, I relate with many of your listeners, and the message that you're bringing out into the world. And so I'm ready for it all, Rick.
Cool. So tell a little bit about the journey. You can give us a snapshot because we want to dig into the emotional grit message, but just tell us a little bit about this journey and what prompted you to leave not only the success path that you were groomed for so many years, not only culturally but professionally, and then embark on this basically unknown journey of going out and taking that big leap, which we love on this show, and going in and just kind of doing what you really felt was your passion and your mission in life.
Yes. I love that question, and for the sake of time, I'll wrap it up with a nice bow tie. But the journey started about in my personal path and discovery started about 4 years ago when I realized that under the veneer of having it all for the sake of society, for the sake of family, for the sake of being in this picture perfect marriage, and having all of the bells and whistles that would come along with it. Growing up culturally Filipino and Indian, There's a ton of pressure for educational success, and on my mom's side, I was everyone was a beauty queen or beauty pageant queen, and so not only was it the drive for education, but also perfection in the way that I looked, the way that I performed, how I danced, how I communicated, and so that was essential. And so the combination of those two really instilled this idea that legacy, pride, and family name was largely important. And so the crack came when, 4 years ago, I was approached by a girlfriend of mine, and we were out one night, and she asked me. It was in a bathroom, and she just asked me. She said, "Neeta, are you happy?" And from that, I knew that she knew, and I was even more almost ashamed and embarrassed that she knew that I had been living this lie. And this lie that, it was perfect. It was picture perfect. I had this Bollywood dream wedding. I had, this $1 million practice that I was running as a cosmetic dentist at the time. Everything that everybody could hope and dream, before the age of 30, I was able to reach this pinnacle of what I thought high drive and overarching success. And it wasn't me. In fact, I was living in a physically and emotionally abusive marriage, and and so subsequent to that, in the next stages, that question not only sparked this internal revolution within myself, but also, the one thing that she asked was, "You have a choice. You can shove all of these things under a rug, or you can choose differently."
Wow.
And so, when you're ready, the teacher appears, right? Yeah. And they can appear as angels. They can appear as snippets on a wall, on a billboard, a note that somebody passes you on a bus or a train. But I guess I was ready for that. And in that moment, everything drastically changed, from restraining orders to a lovely path of, leaving that situation and taking a giant leap. Then in the years after that, it was intense growth, immeasurable growth on so many fronts, because finally I was confronting the many seasons of adversity, if you will, that I had grown up with. Yeah. Which was, losing most of my family before I was 19. I lost my mom, my brother DJ, and my father to medical illnesses, and through a span of about 5 years in my adolescence. And so, that set me on this path of, okay, I was an orphan before I was 19. I had to take care of my youngest sibling, Vinay, who was 14. And so we were kids taking care of each other. And, you had this relentless drive to now, because you're given this opportunity and to, chart forth this family name and this legacy, that there was enormous pressure to not fall into the status quo, and to do more, to achieve more, to compensate, and to really gain that love that you lost. And so in that was where I made a lot of my decisions early on, in personal relationships, which has taught me some amazing and beautiful things, which is why we're talking today about emotional grit.
Yeah. So, a lot of what you're saying, I'm listening with such intensity, and I'm kind of living the whole journey with you, because it's so difficult when you endure that type of loss as a young person. And, we just need to figure out, what do we do next when all the people who are our directors, it's like putting an actor on a stage with no script and no director. Mm-hmm. You wonder what that movie is going to turn out like. And I'm so happy today to be seeing, the trailers of this movie, and to be seeing, the finished product, which is coming out next week. And anybody who's watching or listening to this show, I'm putting out a super, super serious request for you to go to the links and download all of Neeta's stuff, because this young lady is amazing on a million different levels, and you have just begun too. So I'm excited to be talking about this book and what it's going to mean for the rest of us. So how did you come across the term emotional grit? Obviously it represents your own journey, because what you've gone through already is unimaginable for some people. But how did you land on that? And then tell us what grit stands for, and so we can jump in a little bit more to that.
Yeah, so in this process of, self-discovery, which, began when, I left my marriage, it was a series of, different touch points in understanding what self-mastery looks like, and more importantly, what self-love is. And coming from a science background, a doctor by trade, when people would say self-help, especially from an Asian lens, we would laugh. I would laugh. The only thing closest to self-help was probably, church groups that, I would go to. My dad wanted us to go to when we were younger, after my brother and my mom died. And so that was the only thing that I was exposed to on that level, as far as community goes. And so now this, sent me on a tailspin of just this exponential growth journey, which, I had my hands on, meditation, yoga, and I grew up with meditation because my dad would spend his Sundays while my mom was Roman Catholic, and so she would take us to Sunday school and church, and he would be meditating.
Wow.
And so my brothers and I, when we were really young, we thought it would be fun to kind of disturb his meditation. And not a good thing, but so I was exposed to a lot of these different facets of spirituality at an early age. And again, when the teacher is ready, the student appears, and during that time, hitting rock bottom, after all of that, and after you think you've achieved this, certain level of success, it really had me go through, hundreds of different self-help books. Emotional intelligence was a big factor in that, and that's when I started to understand and carve out, the different communities. So the different communities of, spirituality, professional development, and what I was more interested in is human dynamics, because I've been in psychology for for a very long time. My first job, I was a dental assistant, and working on Saturdays when my mother was sick, and I would be answering the phones, and that's when I knew, and it sounds so cliche, but when I was having some of my own turmoil, it was nice to actually then be able to give back and make somebody else smile. So that was when I started to really understand how human dynamics plays such an essential role. But then translating that back to my own growth, as I started to lead with more vulnerability and understanding why people make the decisions that they make, and how they sometimes get stuck in their own stories, it just led me into, things like starting a nonprofit, investing and becoming an angel investor in women and high ambitious women, and then beginning a mastermind group. And so just all of these experiences kept growing at a really exponential rate. And when I started to reduce my hours, because I was speaking a lot, championing self-love for women and girls with my then called nonprofit called Independent Awakening, that's when things started to shift, because a lot of my colleagues and the small business owners, the doctors, people in my own professional networks were like, okay, how are you traveling to all of these different countries and you're still running your dental practice? And when I would tell them that, okay, yeah, but we're actually up by 25% this year, 30% this year, they were just dumbfounded. They're like, okay, where are you getting your training from and your leadership? And so I would go to all different parts of the world to be able to just learn from all of these amazing, teachers in their concepts and their styles. And that's when I started to, consult other people in order to have more freedom into their lives. And really, emotional grit was just a combination and a culmination of all of these different touch points that has led me now to the process of grit, which is really an acronym for grow, reveal, innovate, and transform. And it's the journey of, the old story, accepting, where you are, and then, of course, the transformation of where, you want to be, or that shift for the future.
Yeah, and it's a terrific journey if once you take that step onto this path and you get over the fear of, in your case especially, letting go of a lucrative professional practice, which I'm sure was only going to grow, and it could have been at your physical and emotional expense. But as we talked before the show, we know that dentists, have high drive in some cases, but they very rarely get to look at the big picture and say, who am I becoming, or what am I really doing, other than giving this other person this beautiful smile. Mm-hmm. And so it is a treadmill, and it is a grind sometimes. So in getting out of that and then taking this step, full bore into this book and this speaking, and really being a world traveler to seek the education from these other people and these experts. Tell us a little bit about the acronym of GRIT and how you plan now in this next chapter to bring it to people like me and our audience and anybody who wants it out there.
Yeah, so the way that this whole journey has basically kind of turned into is understanding the grit of our own lives. And while I've been kind of disconnected with the medical field for quite some time now, selling my practice, and it's been that journey for the last 2 years. But in that 2 years, there was so much exponential growth, which led me to all of these different countries, understanding and surveying, how leaders make decisions. And while I work with, and while the Institute works with a lot of, top level leaders and game changers and social entrepreneurs, social activists and innovators, from, anywhere from Silicon Valley to parts of Asia to parts of South America to the Middle East, this book was really a way for the masses to become leaders of their own lives. And, I really saw this as an opportunity to, bring the process of grit out to the everyday heroes, the everyday local heroes, the everyday humans that are, leaders of, their homes or their communities, and just trying to chart just a different way of thinking, navigating through life. Today is obviously very different. We're inundated constantly with messages. We're bombarded by tons of emails. We've got our things to do lists, and our anxieties and antidepressive medications are at an all-time high. Mm-hmm. Stress management has become an essential key to how we live our lives. And a big, huge component of that is our emotions, and obviously that's been a huge factor for me, just of my personal journey. But everyone has human moments, and there's no getting around that. It's just how you're able to look at those moments and be aware of that. And so with grit, the process is really to first be able to be open. So being open to growing, and when you're open to growing, when you're open to discovering those parts of yourself that are dormant, because many times we cover up all of these different things that we're actually feeling because we don't have time for it. Okay, so somebody said something, maybe a boss said something to me, or my spouse said something to me that it didn't really resonate. But because you got to pick up the kids at 3 o'clock, you've got to go to your yoga class at 6, you've got a deadline by 10 o'clock, and then you've got X, Y, and Z, and then the day starts all over again. It's easy to just swallow that comment and bury yourself because, you're so busy. And so you don't, and then that compounds. So the next time your spouse says something, then it compounds again because you do the same thing. So instead of actually taking out maybe the extra 15 minutes and say, hey, honey, love, what did you mean by that? That really, whatever that is, taking that time to actually investigate what and why that's really a trigger for you. That's just one example. And so being able to be open to growing is, crucial, because that sets you on a journey of knowing what lights you up, what are your non-negotiables, what, you're willing to then accept. So with the reveal process, it's really just, it's accepting where you are. Okay. And when you're in acceptance and you actually understand all of your past stories, then you can actually start to make that innovation, or what I call innovate. And what innovate is really that commitment. And so it's that commitment to changing and turning that leaf for you, or taking that leap. And then we get into the final point of grit, which is the transformation. And that's the exciting stuff, because that's really, the action. That's the strategy. That's the, okay, I'm going to go sign up for, 10 different sessions with my coach, or I'm going to go and, sign up for CrossFit, or go to the gym 3 times a week, whatever that looks like for you. But that is your strategy and your game plan.
So I know you started to talk about how this can play out in a relationship, because you gave an example of something, between spouse and spouse. So talk a little bit about how we, if we are starting to want this emotional intelligence, and we are going to go through this grit process, what do we do if our partner just totally doesn't get it? We're not resonating with the other person, and we're on this journey and we don't feel like they are with us. They're either protesting or pulling us down, or because in every relationship it seems like one is growing at a different rate than the other. This is a major issue.
That is huge. And and I think I shared with this with you before, Rick, that is the number one reason why I get called in, actually. Many top leaders, especially in places where, divorce is very taboo, or there's other, marriage woes are just not really talked about, like in places like the Middle East or in India. I'll get called in to do what's called like an empathy leadership training for their teams. But then actually the real questions are, well, I'm actually having this issue with my spouse. And so because those are it's so personal and it's so intimate, but really it's a challenge that we all face as humans, And I always say to my top leaders, and obviously sharing with you guys here, is that, growth, you are going to have different inflection points and different challenges. And it's one thing where, and for my lovely, amazing female counterparts here who kind of sometimes want to take their spouse or their partner and kind of nag them, but to really be patient and, that to appreciate that, when you allow, and I have a quote for you, Rick, because I knew we were talking, and I'm going to read it for you. It's a great one by Eckhart Tolle. But, when we allow the space for our, significant other or our loved one to actually grow, and just give them that opportunity, no judgment or anything like that, you're opening that up. It's not going to be the same pace as you, okay? But being able to understand the perception, how they make their decisions, and what actually is the driving force behind those decisions. Because, we could judge it on the surface because it's easier and it's faster. But what if we did one step further and, perhaps you've been married for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, but, instead of judging to see, okay, well, they're not going to be open to going to this, to this event or reading the same book as me, maybe just, it's a simple question of just asking, right? Because maybe they might not be ready at that point in time, but then it also goes into another question of, well, is this something of interest to you? And realizing, okay, because it takes 2 people to really start that process, right? And so, and what I like to say is treating a marriage or a relationship kind of like you would treat, your business.
Exactly.
There needs to be that work, and there needs to be that consistency. And, so many, when I say this to so many of, my colleagues and even clients, have you done, what you call a financial plan for your business? Have you done that for not just your personal goals, but what about your relationship goals?
100%.
And nobody actually, there's very, very few who actually have that intention to do that. And when they do, these are the ones that are having thriving, fulfilling, growing, and growth-centered relationships.
Well, I use the example of, like I pick one or the other. Like you're the CEO, I'm the CFO. Doesn't matter which, could be, there's one who's usually more of a money person and
Right.
one who's more organizing and running things. So it makes perfect sense. And then would you go into a board meeting with your CEO or CFO and not communicate or not be truthful? And I use real world examples of, we have to build this factory. This is the financial statement. This is the forecast. This is why we want to invest this money. And should we do it? And this is going to be the return. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it makes perfect sense to us when we look at things from a business standpoint. And just by the same token, when I talk to business people, I talk about your loving relationships, because sometimes when we work with people, we have to treat it like a marriage or a romantic relationship where we really want the best for both parties. And it's amazing how much each facet of our lives spills over into the other one.
Oh my gosh, we so many of us, we separate, our business, our work, our our personal relationships, but there's so many blurred lines there, and even more so now because transparency and authenticity is huge.
Yeah.
And why would you actually separate that? And that's a powerful point that you make with it, because it's true even with co-founders and business relationships. You have to treat that like a marriage. That is your other marriage. And
100%.
So,
and for us entrepreneurs, we often spend more time with these baby businesses when we're growing them. And even when they become adults, we still think we have to baby them. It's just the nature of being an entrepreneur is that we're always on. And
yes.
We really have to make a conscious effort to turn it off and put the phone down, or turn it off, put it in the car or whatever, and get involved in the love part. So tell us now, what is the timeline of all of the goodies now? So I could release this episode as early as today. So you tell me now, tell the audience, when is the book coming out?
Yeah.
When is it? When are the links available? When are all the goodies ready to go? Because I'm ready to go with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that, Rick. So, get that copy. It's coming out in 6 days. It's coming out September 20th, okay. And actually, it's globally. It's Global Peace Day, and so the mission is to build a world of compassionate leaders. And if we're all being compassionate human beings in our own right, within our own relationships, then what kind of world would that look like?
It would be awesome.
So. Yeah, and so getting back into being more human. And it starts with us. So it's going to be an exciting, fun next week. Where you can get the book, I'm sure you can put it in the show notes, but it's emotionalgrit.com. You can pre-order it now, /pre-order, and there's a ton of bells and whistles, and so. But if you order it during next week, you are going to get not only the audiobook version, and this is the first time I'm sharing this live, so Rick, this is totally for your audience, but you'll be able to get the audiobook version as well as the Emotional Grit guidebook. So cool. Make sure you pre-order that, and that is before the 20th, and it's at emotionalgrit.com /pre-order.
Cool, thank you for that. And also, in case anyone is interested in talking to you further about having you come in and speak and or consult to them or their organizations, can they also find something? Do you have a link for that? Oh my gosh,
yeah. So Global Grit Institute is where we're at, globalgritinstitute.com.
Okay.
And neetabhushan.com for any press, any interviews. If you wanted to just come by and say hi or, check me out, I'm very, personal with people. So cool. It's been a fun ride.
Well, this is going to be, just the beginning of our support and the Marriage Boss audience and world supporting all of what you do. So I want to make that known publicly, that we are, this is one of our chosen partners And I just love what you're doing, always have, and I'm even more excited now. So thank you so much for joining me today, Neeta.
Oh my gosh, Rick, such a pleasure, and such an honor to keep learning. And, relationships are, one of the things where it brings parts of ourself that have been dormant. It brings parts of that alive, and that's kind of where we get the most healing. So,
say it, girl.
Excited.
Say it. That's it. That's right.
Of course.
All right, cool.
Oh, and before I let you guys go, I am actually going to read that quote, because I think that would be a really good one for the Marriage Boss audience. Okay. And so here it is. All right, guys, listen up. So you cannot transform yourself, and you certainly cannot transform your partner or anyone else. All you can do is create space for that transformation to happen, for grace and love to enter.
What a beautiful way to end the show. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Rick. Lots of love.
You too, honey.